Because a lot of those fears of death are easily taken away with good conversation of what really is true.
Right.
A lot of bad teachings and just ignorance lead to these fears.
Welcome to the podcast.
Hey,
we're here with Chris today. So Chris, I'm really, really excited to talk to you about, the subject of death. Super easy, super chill, low-key.
Yeah. It's everywhere.
It is everywhere. So let's start with a fun one.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think happens when we die?
Currently?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, because it probably changes, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So where I'm at now in life, not sure.
Mm-hmm.
But, well, yeah, everything I say is not sure because it's...
Yeah, how can you know?
Can't prove it. Yeah.
Right.
I think the journey of life is a progression of consciousness. Be from a baby up until you die, your consciousness expands and grows and evolves. Some people call it enlightenment. So right now I'm working on the idea that, yes, it just continues. So even though we don't have this physical body, we can prove scientifically that the consciousness, that there's this part of us that isn't part of this physical realm, that we can't, isn't contained in the physical realm.
So you just said we can prove scientifically?
Yeah, it's way above my head in math.
Yeah.
But I believe...
Wait, math? Okay, wait, this is blowing my mind. What?
Yeah, mathematically proven it, yeah. It's either mathematics or logic, but follow the same route. I think it was Penrose.
Okay.
Pretty sure.
Who proved through using math or logic, or maybe both, that there is a part of us that is not
there's
this.
If I remember correctly, there's an equation that helps show this, or this line of logic that shows this.
Is this something that Kevin O'Hara could help us unpack?
Yes.
Because I have him, I think, tomorrow.
Yeah.
So we will
ask him about that. He'll know infinitely better than I do.
Okay, but you are also close with him, so I'm sure you guys have had conversations.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what got me on this path of that.
Okay. So what would you classify that thing being? Is that like what the soul is, or the essence of...
Yeah, Brett and I have had long conversations on, is there a difference between soul and consciousness? What is a soul? What is consciousness? Whatever. Because if you take away the brain, it seems to be the catalyst or the medium in which we interact with the world.
Right.
So I don't know. I think it's just something that's not this. It's like, how do you describe a color you've never seen? So in trying to describe what consciousness is, I think it's hard. We can only use the window we have. So imagine viewing this new color in black and white. That's a perspective of it. So we have this perspective of consciousness or soul. But regardless of what it actually is, I think that the window always gets bigger, clearer, and truer as it goes. I don't think we'll ever hit the truest version of consciousness. I mean, maybe we will.
Interesting. So what would be, hypothetically, what would be the end goal? So you're still talking about like human beings on Earth, consciousness, or are you talking about the thing that continues after you are no longer on Earth? Like that potential, is that what you're talking about? That the consciousness continues to expand?
Oh, I think in our day and age, like while we're physically alive and afterwards.
Okay.
So I think our consciousness as a society grows, and it goes through dips, obviously, but I believe it has a continuing trend of going up to some extent. But then afterwards in my mind, this life is used as a tool to learn and expand your consciousness or grow your consciousness, or that window to view as much as you can. And then afterwards, we are not limited by the physical limitations that are set upon us here, that it is increased by orders of magnitude, like up. So like 10 to the powers of whatever.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So is there awareness? Like in your mind, are you aware of who Chris was on Earth with people around here?
After we die?
Yeah.
I don't know, because I struggle with seeing how much that matters.
Right.
Because I say that, but I also would say, but it matters because that's the thing that helped shape that window that then propelled you forward.
Right.
But I also think I played around with the idea of, is this the only time we've done that?
Right. So do you believe in either reincarnation or like cycling through this life?
I can't say I believe it. I can't say I don't know if I can't say it's also not true. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
So
I'm a big proponent of not knowing.
Right.
So I don't know.
Right. So, but it's interesting that you would have some sort of idea or even answer to the question of like, I'm going to grasp here and try to explain this the best I can. So what has kind of led you to this moment of thinking, yes, there is that maybe it's not so important to have those memories and to have awareness, but that, and we can't even comprehend like what would happen,
yeah. But
knowing that if we do continue, then it is kind of in this exponentially greater form. Mm-hmm. So what has kind of led you to this point?
Oh gosh. Many conversations over many hours.
So you have had conversations about death with people?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. When I heard you talked about that you were doing a podcast about death, I was like, I want to do that. This sounds awesome.
So, and right now, currently, do you have fear surrounding death or any sort of, okay. Mm-mm. So my goal with this podcast series is to, first of all, open up the conversation surrounding death, which is something that you've done in your own life, which I think is amazing. And first open it up to where people, when they see death, even the word, they're not like, no, thank you. Yeah. It's going to be sad or whatever.
Yeah, it's not just a morbid thing.
Right. And so that's the first goal, is just see what a conversation about death is, and then also to eliminate or at least pull down the fear or the anxiety surrounding this thing that currently we're all probably going to experience. Yeah. So, and you've arrived there, not by easy means, from what I know. Yeah. So, yeah, can we kind of go through the journey?
Yeah. So, I struggled a lot as a young kid with attachment issues. So I was adopted, and then I struggled with, do I love my birth mom or do I love my mom, my adopted mom? And I had to learn that I can love both. Yeah. And I was super afraid of being left alone. If my mom was late to pick me up from school, like I would go into panic attack, thinking I was like, she just like left me. Right. And then I was afraid of like being alone in the dark, being trapped. But death was the biggest one. Okay. Living, I still can't, but it's easier. I couldn't fathom living for an eternity. I couldn't get through the concept of, what am I going to do forever?
So that terrified you more than...
Yeah,
okay.
And it didn't matter if I was in heaven or hell, especially growing up in a very fundamentalist church. I was like, if I'm in heaven, what do I do? Right. And they're like, oh, you'll praise God. Like, forever? Like, what do I do after a million years of that? And I'm still going to do it. Like, I can't think of that many words to say over and over again. Right. And I didn't know how that was supposed to be good. And my mom tried to comfort me with, you can just like sleep. Ask God to put you to sleep for a long time. But I was like, but that doesn't help because it still goes on. Right. But I mean, for an infinite amount of time, how long you're asleep doesn't matter. Because you have an infinite amount of time when you wake up. Right. That's why I would sit in the car panicking, just not knowing what to do, crying in the garage with my mom. It's the one memory I have doing that. I met Brett, and he kind of helped. It was more of, think of all the things you do here and all the things you enjoy. Imagine being able to do that forever, and then finding infinite more things that you enjoy that you didn't even know about that you can then learn. And I always had a passion for learning, so that was good and that helped. But I still had to like just brush it off and be like, when the fear would come back up, be like, don't worry about it. I'll find fun things to do, and just like stop making myself question it. So
in that fear, was there any part of that was like the realization that you are dying? Like, that's something that I think I have, where it's like, I don't necessarily want to know that I'm dying when I'm dying. I think if that makes sense.
I think the scariest part of death for me now, and aside from the eternity afterwards, one of them, is how I'm going to die. I was like, I feel cowardly saying this, but I admit it, so I don't feel as cowardly saying it. I would pray, like, God, just make it like go easy. I don't want to be in pain. Yeah. I used to be the little kid that walk into the bathroom alone, like in public restrooms, be like, if there's a vampire, just bite me. Like, don't hurt me, just bite me and turn me into a vampire. I won't fight. And so
it is the suffering though. I think a lot of people are like, I don't want to, because you can't really prepare for the panic that happens where it's like, this is it. And it's just like, that's, I think, what I'm most afraid of.
But you can prepare.
Okay.
In experience.
Okay. Do you feel like that's kind of what you've done?
Yeah. And it's all perspective as well, which I think the experience gives perspective. I think you can get, because I feel Ryan arguing in my head. He's like, see, I told you. But I think you can get experience. You can gain perspective without the actual experience. You can experience through others as well. It doesn't all have to be personal experience.
Okay. I guess that's kind of the goal of this podcast as well. Like the people watching don't have to be people who have been touched by death. It's more so, what is it and how can you learn from other people's experiences too?
Yeah. And I think it was a slow progression. I've experienced a lot of death. I'm trying to think of the first memory I have of death. And I'm pretty sure, and I might retcon this later, but in first grade, one of my classmates died.
Oh, wow.
She had a brain aneurysm, and she was complaining of a horrible headache in class. And the teacher's like, you're fine, go sit down. Took a nap and died.
Wow.
Yeah.
This was not at school, right?
No, she went home.
Okay.
And then her mom went to wake her up. Like, she napped after school. She went home early.
Oh, man.
And,
in first
she
grade.
passed away. Yeah.
Wow.
And like our whole like classroom like put money together and like planted a tree and whatever.
Do you remember what you thought about where she went and what happened to her there?
So I struggle with feeling calloused, but that's how I might be viewed. That's fine. My biggest thought at that time was the first grade teacher. I had known her family for a long time, and so she was my aunt.
Okay.
And so I was worried how Aunt Amy must feel for not letting her go home or not letting her go to the doctor earlier. I don't remember feeling necessarily sad. And I knew her, and she was in my class. You're in first grade, you have a smaller class.
Right.
And it was a private school on top of that. So, and like people like try to like write down like good memories you have of this person. And I was like, well, like we shared colored pencils once maybe.
Right.
But I don't know. That was second grade, actually. Sorry. It was second grade, not first. And then a lady at our church died, and I took advantage of that so I didn't have to go to school to go to her funeral.
So this was more so not impacting you as like a death would typically impact people. It was more just like they were here and now they're not.
Yeah. And I think I had trouble empathizing even with my own fear, putting it on them. Because at that time I was still having panic attacks of what am I going to do when I die?
Right.
But I couldn't feel that for them, just for myself. And then my birth mom passed away when I was in high school. And I had a lot of guilt with that, just for different. Does a scenario matter? Or, I mean, because I don't think it has to do with death, aside from dealing with.
That's up to you.
Okay. So she had called me a few days before, and I was playing a video game, and I lied to her that I was busy, and she died the next day, and I didn't call her back. And I was like, what the hell kind of person am I?
Yeah.
But again, it's a selfish-based thing. But I was sad, and it was the first experience that I remember of the dealing with death, and like I will never see her again.
Okay.
I'll never be able to have those feelings or those conversations we had, or be able to change the stupid thing I did. I'll never be able to like, I'm sorry to her.
Right.
And some things that happened the summer prior to her that hit me really hard. And so there's just a lot of emotion already dealing with there. And then about 2 years later, I was babysitting my nephew and he passed away. And that was hard because I had to hold a dead infant.
Yeah.
It was like, looking back, it's like so surreal. Just like I've held a dead person.
Yeah.
And then I didn't know what to do. And it was at my mom's house, and I had moved out by that point. And I hadn't been there. It was my first time at her house, or one of the first times at that house. So I didn't know the address.
Oh, man.
And yeah, I had band practice, and I wasn't allowed to make phone calls or to leave the house or to do anything. And so my mom had to call, and I wasn't allowed to tell anyone what had happened.
Really?
Yeah. When the cops got there. So my mom knew because I had called her right away.
Right.
But after that, like, you can't call anyone. My cousin came, she came to the door and like, you can't come in. She goes, he doesn't have any adult here.
Right.
I need to be here. I was 19, but
Wow.
still.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they let her in. She brought me a change of clothes because there was blood on me. And
What do you guys know what happened?
the doctor ended up just saying it was SIDS. It was 18 months, which I always thought was old for SIDS.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Wow.
He was sleeping for his nap and just passed away.
So how did those things shape you? Because that's a very real situation. It's not just I heard a story from somebody or I kind of knew them a little bit. Like these are very, very, do you classify them as traumatic experiences?
CJ was definitely traumatic. I think when my birth mom passed away, it was traumatic, but for different reasons.
Right.
I was in high school and I would say it was a chemical imbalance, but I was already going through counseling. But I didn't know why I was depressed.
Okay.
And then people were like, well, look, your home life is pretty shitty. And then your birth mom passed away. And you're right to feel this way.
Right.
But in the moment, I'm like, no, it's not why I feel this way. I'm fine with that. And I realized through that, I bottled up a lot of things and I didn't deal with them. I said I dealt with them, but really I just was really good at cutting things off.
Right.
And so I think at that point in life is when I started learning to not just cut them off, but to actually deal with it and then process it. And then if I cut it off, it's not that I'm actually cutting it off. I'm just not letting myself dwell in feelings or to do this. And it's a healthier way of dealing with things.
Was that something you learned through counseling?
Not through actually a counseling place. That was just like through things with Brett.
Okay. So having kind of a mentor who understood your situation and who also has a very open mind, kind of guiding you to say, deal with it or at least just deal with it.
Yeah. Mostly counseling up until that point was actually at a counseling office through school and then through some other place. And they prescribed medication and it was, you're okay. This is why, like, you feel this way because of your birth mom dying or because of this happening and this and this. And
right.
I couldn't see it, but that didn't help me deal with it.
Right.
Brett was the one who helped me actually dig up things I had buried and pointed out that I was burying things in the first place.
Right. So is that like the first step to kind of arriving at where you are today, where you're like you said to me before we started, like, no questions are off limits. Like, let's talk about it. So being so okay with all of these things, and it's not saying that this is the final arrival point because you're going to continue that, further. But would you say that was kind of the first step, was what am I burying and how is this actually affecting me? Yeah.
Because I was always introspective, but everyone has their own blindnesses with themselves. And I think that helped a lot. It really helped me turn my analytical introspectiveness to good use.
Okay.
Like when CJ passed away, the family and friends were very worried that I would just fall back into this depression because it wasn't too long after.
Right.
But I didn't. I mean, it was hard. It was definitely hard. But no, I processed it. I dealt with it, and I moved on. And I dealt with it in a healthy way. There's definitely people who don't deal with death in healthy ways.
Right.
And that's part of my want. When you talk about the podcast and different things, I'm like, I want people to be able to see and deal with death
right.
in a healthy manner.
Right.
Not let their life crumble around them because of it. And I think the experiences in life, not just in death, but in the things I've done, the activities of life, have given me a better perspective on death. And for me, how little it really matters.
Like death is not something that should be consuming your thoughts, your fear. Like we should have fear for certain things, but maybe not this big thing. Yeah. And that's where I don't think it's a big thing. I think it's been made out to be a big thing. And because of how materialistic people have gotten, not just materialistic, there's the word I'm missing. So consumed with the physical and what this world is, and that this is all there is. And that's what really brings out the fear of death.
There's a lot of Christianese people who will see, well, there's an afterlife, so I have no problem with death. Yet they live their life totally not that way.
Yeah. Actually, that's interesting. So there can be this defense mechanism essentially in your own brain that says, no, it's okay. I have this figured out. It's in order. I know where I'm going. I know what the meaning of life is. And if it is not something that's based, and when I say truth, I mean for the individual, not just, like there has to be some sort of
ultimate,
objective.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if it doesn't sound like it's true for you, which I have found in my own life, you've probably found that when you were given an explanation for death initially, it probably didn't sit right with you because you were like, this doesn't explain what I'm feeling and not just for me, but for others. Like when other people pass away, it's like, how do I process that? And why am I feeling this way about it? And I feel like when you're given the cookie cutter answer and it doesn't fit, what do you do at that point? You just say, well, then I'll never know, or I'll always be afraid of this. Like,
I had resigned to just not knowing. And then I felt not ashamed because I just didn't know what was wrong with me. Like, why is everyone else okay with it? But I don't know. And then I went through the whole struggle because my parents were divorced and I went to 2 different types of churches. So I had the one like salvation done, like you pray and you're good, like go commitment or you're fine. They wouldn't preach that, but
right.
And the other was like, you lied to your mom today, you better pray for salvation again,
right?
Because you're not secure.
Oof,
so
that's especially for children. That's wrong.
Yeah, and I already struggled with the afterlife, what to do anyways.
Right.
So.
Which it's interesting because I've never heard someone afraid of what they would do forever. I feel like that's a really, really interesting look into that. So with the viewer who's watching right now saying, okay, how do I get to the point of no longer being afraid or no longer making it such a big deal? Yeah. What would your advice be?
Oh, damn. Try things. Life has a lot to offer, but it's not the only thing that offers something.
What do you mean by that?
Does that make sense? This life that we live from birth till death has a lot to offer in expanding this consciousness that you have. But it's not the only thing that will expand or give you, or that has something to give in return. I've had enough bad things happen that I don't know. So when I went through my divorce, I was like, I mean, of course it was a shitty thing.
Right.
Can I say that?
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, shoot. But I had this thing in me that just puts it into perspective. Like, yeah, it's not the worst thing. Like, it wasn't CJ dying, or it wasn't, I know plenty of other people who've had it way worse than I did.
So is it perspective? Would you say perspective is kind of the key to eliminating that fear or the fear of the unknown, essentially, which death falls in that category?
So that's why I started off earlier with the experience that leads to the perspective, the thing that opens up the consciousness, the evolution, the enlightenment. And that's why I use the window. And that's why I use the window analogy, because it's a perspective of something. And the more you experience, not just through physically doing, but through others and like almost osmosis type of thing, I believe you can grow your experience. And the more you know and the more you feel. So I don't know how much I can actually bring up on video.
We could always edit.
Okay, you can?
We can.
Yeah. Okay. So doing psychedelics, things like that, were weird and good because I'm not good with feelings, and it made me feel in ways that I can't explain. And that was just another thing that was like, there's just more to this. And there's a lot of things I have in my beliefs that I don't say that are based out of that because I question everything. And so I don't even know if they're good beliefs, but they are still true to me. So I don't say them to others because it's not true necessarily, but for me it is.
Right. So something I got out of the podcast I did with my mom was that everyone's experience with life, with death, with everything is completely individual. That my death, your death, other people, it's all going to be different because it is a personal experience. And we did kind of touch a little bit on psychedelics and how she uses meditation as a way to kind of deal with the difficult things and answer those questions that she's having. And we kind of talked about the similarities between meditation kind of allowing you this place to deal with these difficult things, and psychedelics kind of, it's almost like a lot of meditation in one, like a lot of those sessions that you would take, kind of shoving it into a multiple hour experience where you do have to kind of deal with those things, but it almost gives you a perspective that is not in your own mind. So are you okay with people knowing that you did that?
Yeah. I just didn't know if it was okay to bring up on.
No, it's totally fine.
Then yeah.
I think that's part of the true journey that you've had. And that's why I think people who have used them, people who haven't used them, I think everyone's story is valid because it's how you deal with this big question.
Yeah. Well, and I'm a big proponent of being open with those things, because the more people say, hey, look, there's a normal person and they did that, or they smoke every now and then, like,
right.
Then it's not like, oh, that person who's useless, like, yeah, that stoner, oh yeah, that's all only people who smoke do that. Like,
right.
No.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Did you use a psychedelic as, like, what was your intention with that? Because that's also a huge stigma, is people just do them for like a party drug, essentially. And you seem to have great respect for doing that. And what it gave you was something that you had been trying to find anyways. And it kind of gave you this, and we've talked extensively about what you experienced. And it's so interesting that you went through something. It was an experience you had that it's not like hiking a mountain together where we're all like, we all went to the top of the mountain and we all saw it. It's your own interpretation, but not being able to interpret it. It's like, I don't even have the words to describe, but it gave you peace that you couldn't have found otherwise.
Yeah. It's immensely frustrating, yet I'm totally okay with it at the same time that I can't describe it.
Right.
The original question was,
like, why did you use it?
Because I wanted to learn new things. I wanted to experience something that I believed would be beneficial. Like I did my research. I was prepared before I went in and did anything. And my purpose in it was to view myself in the world, in this thing we've been given and through consciousness in a new way. I wanted to widen my perspective.
Okay.
And I had done plenty of meditation in the years prior to that, to different levels. And as a kid, being very introverted, not having many friends, I did a lot of unknowing, contemplative meditation type stuff. Meditation was a bad thing growing up, in the church I grew up in as I was young. So I never called it that. But once I found out what it is, I'm like, I've always done that.
I've been doing that. Yeah.
And so I think that has also helped through a lot of these dealings. So one of the things I did in first grade, I had this friend who we went to Awanas together. I don't know if anyone knows what Awana is, but it's a church program.
What does it stand for? All workmen are not afraid.
I don't know.
Awanas. There's something like that.
Yeah, maybe.
That stands for something, but it's like it's almost like Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts for church people.
For church people, yeah. And he's like, yeah, I'm making up this story. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, I just sit in my bed and close my eyes and I go to this different world. I'm like, really? And I started doing that. So I made up my own world and had this own story. What scared me later on, before I found out that it was okay, was these people that I created would do things I didn't intend. I didn't plan. That I felt that they had their own control. Like they controlled themselves, not me.
Interesting.
Now I view it as a subconscious coming out and doing those things.
Okay. So it wasn't like astral projection where you were like floating around and...
No. In this world, I was a different version of me.
Interesting.
And what I see happening now, viewing back, it was the things that were undealt with. It was the subconscious that would have a venue to come out and display itself where I had bottled it up or I didn't even know to deal with. But it was a great venue for great avenue for a lot of stories, and that's what got me into writing and doing things like that.
So would you call that meditation?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah. And then after that, once I learned meditation was okay, I actually started doing what the typical meditation is.
So that was kind of an avenue to expand. And I want to talk about what you refer to when you say consciousness and expanding it. And that seems to be something that you hear people saying a lot nowadays. And what's fun for me is seeing the different people who say it. And you're like, what do you really mean when you say that kind of stuff? Because now you can get a variety of explanations. So when you say expanding consciousness and like what that entails for your own life, what do you mean by that, and why is that important?
Have you read the spiral dynamics stuff?
No.
Okay. I don't remember exactly the order of colors and things like that, but basically they view it as like this spiral going down or up, whatever. And it talks about more, that's the evolution of society kind of things. But I think they do it individually as well, like where there's red and blue and green, and the red is the primitive part of you. The colors are important. I might have the colors wrong, but there's a stage where it's the primitive part of you, the part that needs the water, shelter, and food, whatever. And then it builds upon that until where you get the society, or purple's like this tribal type of thing. And then it evolves past that. And that's usually when I'm saying consciousness, that's what I think of. Actually, I loved spiral dynamics when I found out about it. I read a lot about it. Doesn't say a lot. I don't remember exactly the colors and the verbiage used.
But it's like different stages of like human consciousness of evolution. Is that kind of a way to describe it?
That's how I view it. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's not how I don't think they describe it.
Okay.
But when I'm talking about consciousness, that's what I correlate it to.
Okay.
But also I view it as, how does a baby view the world versus the 90-year-old who's lived life and views the world. It's based on your circumstances. Consciousness is what you think, how you feel, how you react. It's so broad, it's hard to explain what consciousness is.
Is that the thing that continues?
Yeah.
Okay. So what would, if you were going to describe Chris after Chris has died, what are you?
I don't know. But
like, do you imagine a ball of light, a body, nothing?
Honestly, I don't worry about it.
Okay.
I don't. Because this is where my brain goes, like, I don't know. I could just be like, why would I have another physical limitation put on me after death? Like, what would be if we can show that it's not necessary, why would I have it again? Unless there is a cycle type of thing where I have to go into something and learn something new that I couldn't have learned before. Okay. In which case, then that's almost like a reincarnation type of aspect.
Right.
Which I'm not saying I believe in, but I'm also saying I don't.
So the possibilities are open, and you're saying whatever it is, bring it on. Okay. So, I mean, I think that's probably the healthiest way to view it.
And that's where, like the saying where I know the least, but I've never felt more secure. Like, I don't have to worry about it. And it's not an ignorant, I'm fine.
Right.
It's, I know quite a bit. I've learned quite a bit, and that's why I'm fine.
If you could know, would you want to know?
Sure.
Really?
I love knowing.
So if they said, we now know what happens after you die, we have proof, all this, would that be extremely exciting, or would that be something that you're like...
I would want to know.
Okay.
Yeah, because death is everything. So there's ignorance to death, or there's a death to ignorance. And so knowing something is just another death. Being less ignorant to, like a kid has a lot of ignorant things in life. They believe in things that end up dying. And that itself is another form of death. And so, no, if someone told me, hey, I can prove what happens after you die. Exactly. Like, great. Because to me, that's death anyways.
Right.
And even if it turns out that when you die, you die. Like, there's no soul, or the consciousness ends up leaving and disperses and turns into nothing. Fine. I have no problem with that.
Right, because how are you going to do anything about it?
Yeah. But also, like, you have to, I think experiences have made me content with this. I can do as much as I can here, and I can only hope for what happens afterwards. And that's why I say I don't believe, I don't know anything about after I die. I have hopes. But it's...
Would you say that you've ever experienced like a nihilistic, is that a word? Have you ever lived in that state where you were like, nothing has meaning, it's hopeless, that whole thing?
When I was really depressed, yeah, in high school, which I think is when a lot of those things start in people. But I knew, after being out of it, it was really easy for me to point out where those things came from.
Okay. So self-introspection and looking at what's actually going on, that's kind of what we referred to as like a good first step, is like what's actually affecting me. So how does someone do that? How do you
become introspective?
Well, how do you go from being somebody who says, I'm depressed, life is meaningless, there is no hope, that kind of thing. Like, what is actually the difference between that and starting the journey to, wait a second, what's affecting me? Do you think Brett's intervention and saying, hey, we need to talk was important? Like, was there something you did on your own?
So I remember I said I went to counseling and they gave me medication. Well, there was the point where I no longer had insurance and I couldn't get it. I didn't have the money to get medication. So I went to my counselor and I was like, hey, this is the situation. What do I do? At that point, Ryan, Chase, and I were playing at a youth group. And there were times where I'd just like, in the middle of the music, I'd just put my bass down and walk away and walk. It was near downtown Sarasota. And I would walk, not pay attention, cross 41, cross major streets, just not pay attention. I wasn't intentionally trying to kill myself. I would just walk away. And then I did come up with plans too. And upon talking to my counselor about the stuff, it's like, I need medication. And he's like, well, you can commit yourself to what's it called? Manatee Glens. I was like, okay. He's like, they'll give you medication right away and you'll be in there. I'm like, okay. So I did. Rode in a police car, my only time.
So was that a Baker Act?
If you do it to yourself, I don't know. Because he didn't Baker Act me. I had like signed a thing. I'm willingly going. Right. Well, I don't know.
Okay. But you did commit yourself. Okay.
Yeah. And that was the scariest, I say the scariest experience of my life.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
I hated it so much.
Why?
So I drove in the cop came, like, are you going to resist? I was like, no. Yeah. And because the cop didn't know that I was willingly going or I was signing to go.
Oh, okay.
So I had to sit in the back seat. And then she stopped. She's like, are you okay? Like, yeah. She's like, you want to sit up front? Yeah. Okay. So I sat in the front seat with her and she took me to Manatee Glens. It's a surreal experience going.
Really?
Like you go, they strip you of everything you have. I don't mean like take your clothes off, strip you, but they take everything you have. I was really big into sleep pants at the time. And
sleep pants.
Like, do you know like the cloth pants you wear to bed?
Like sweatpants? Not
sweatpants though. Anyways, so they removed all the strings in the sleep pants. Okay. They remove your shoelaces. You can't have a belt. And I literally went into the counselor not knowing what to do to then going straight to Manatee Glens. So I didn't have anything. I didn't have clothes. I didn't have anything. I just went with what I had in my hands. And then I stayed at Manatee Glens, which isn't like you see in movies where like the insane asylum type of thing, but it's still a mental ward. Right. There are still mentally unsafe people.
Oh, just there with you.
I roomed with someone. I didn't sleep. That was a time in my life where I was sleeping. I went 11 days and I slept 7 hours total. Whoa. There were nights where I just didn't sleep. There were nights where I got like 2 hours of sleep.
Was it because of the roommate or just because of the situation?
This was before I went to Manatee Glens.
Oh, okay. So you already had kind of issues with sleep.
Yes.
Okay, that alone.
That will add to it for sure.
Yeah.
I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping. And they force you to eat. If you don't eat, they force you. I never
resisted.
Yeah,
right.
So I don't know what they would have done. But you get medication if you don't sleep. So I just laid there and pretended to sleep like I did when I was a little kid.
Wow.
Hearing other people in rooms over screaming, having to the only people I could deal with weren't okay.
I'll bet that was a big perspective for you. Like, am I on this level? Yeah.
And there were some people who were just super depressed.
Yeah.
But I'm already not an extroverted person, and I don't like a lot of communication with people I don't know, especially like intimate, like person to person type of things like that.
Right.
With groups, and you had to do group therapy stuff, and you had to, like, I had to sit in this room and do puzzles with the 2 people I didn't know. Like,
yeah.
why? It
Right.
feels so weird.
Yeah.
And I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. So, like, Ryan doesn't remember, or Chase doesn't remember me ever being there.
Really?
But, like, they visited, family visited, and so it was, like, I felt so ashamed. And then I felt like an outcast, and I didn't even feel like I belonged there.
Yeah.
And then after a few days, I was like, okay, cool, I'm done. I went out, and I couldn't get out.
Oh,
so I was there for a week.
Oh.
And so then I panicked, like, what if I, like, in all the movies where, not all the movies, but there are movies where, like, they get stuck in there or they're perceived as being crazy.
Right. And it's like, no, I'm really okay. It's like, ma'am, and they stab you with the stuff. And you're like.
So everything I did, I was like, okay, is this going to be crazy? Like, I got to make sure I say things right now. And so then I just became super paranoid with me.
How you were being perceived. Yeah.
And I think, I can't say when the turning point was, but that was one of them. That was for sure. Yeah. And Brett being there and being able to talk to me and relate to me in ways, and how I think, definitely helped me get to the point where I could not just be super, which I still struggle with, being super negatively analytical about myself. So I was like, yeah, I did this, but I still haven't done this, or haven't done this, or I only got that because of this. And I make all these excuses, and I was never able to, and I still struggle with, again, appreciating or congratulating or just leaving it at, I did this, and that's it. Like, just say it and done.
That's like accepting yourself and what you've done and saying, I own it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's still a progression I'm learning.
Right.
Still a thing I'm trying to get better at. But I think that's just one of my weaknesses. I haven't been afraid of deconstruction. So the idea of, like, you hold a belief and then it gets taken down. It's shown that's not true, or there's a better way to believe. I've never really struggled with changing those.
Okay.
I came from a very strict fundamental Baptist church where, like, music that landed on the 2 and 4, the 1 and 3, I forgot which one, was like Satan's music.
Right.
Couldn't go to the movies, couldn't listen to the Joy FM.
Wow.
Yeah. Just like weird.
Yeah. It's like a lot of barriers to say, like, the outside world is dangerous and corrupt, so stick here. But then you're like, but I'm going to experience those things anyway. So if I don't even know how to comprehend it, then that's not helpful.
My mom was good at not making us be that way. We were that way at church, so we pretended.
Right.
But then we would come home and, like, she had her liquor cabinet, and we went to the movies.
Right.
My mom swore, like, whatever. Like, I think every family there was that, though. That's why there's the jokes where if you want to drink your beer alone, bring 2 Baptists. But if they're going to drink your beer, if you bring one, they'll drink all your beer.
Right. That's true. Yeah. That it's a very, like. But that's also, I think there's a lot of, like, I want to fit in somewhere. And I think a lot of times people put on what the expectation of that group requires.
Yeah, the fear of not fitting in. Yeah.
Right.
And that made me resent fake and pretending and just non-authentic people. But when those things were, I always questioned them. And then when I met Brett, and he's like, yeah, you don't have to believe that. I'm like, oh, thank you.
Right.
And I think part of it was learning to find good beliefs to reset back up. And Brett was good at helping me build those. But to the point where I'm at now, where it's like, I have a foundation, very few things I believe as true. Everything else is a belief based off of that. But if they're taken away, that's fine, because they're not the truth things, which I think there's very, very few of.
So you're a truth seeker. Whatever could be. Do you believe that there is absolute truth?
Don't know. If I said yes, then that would be an absolute truth.
True.
I don't know.
But I'm just wondering if you're in pursuit of this thing that is true beyond anything else.
Just truth in all things.
Okay.
I won't take it. Yeah, I want to know if there's an absolute truth. Yeah. Also, I'll look for the truth. Is there an absolute truth? But I think that is what helps build takes the person from the super fear of the unknown, which is what death is, and the fear of being forgotten, into introspection, and building these beliefs. Because a lot of those fears of death are easily taken away with good conversation of what really is true.
Right.
A lot of bad teachings and just ignorance lead to these fears.
Right.
I'm a big proponent of ignorance is the root of all evil, and I've had many conversations that's not. But
well, you hear people say like ignorance is bliss, and there is a huge group of people that believe, oh, if you got a weed whacker right outside the door.
I thought that was rain for a second. I was like, what the heck?
If somebody were to say, okay, Chris, on the matter of death, what would you say your biggest thing that you have learned that you want to share with people? What is that?
Not to fear it. I mean, don't make it so big, because death is in everything in small ways.
And it's a part of life, so it's one of those things that you just have to accept.
Yes, it's in everything, in every way. That
terrifying, not terrifying.
Yeah,
all sorts.
So in every way, like doing this podcast itself is a death to the life of not having the podcast.
True.
So I had this period of time where I was like, I didn't know about the podcast, and then the birth of me knowing, and then I lived for a few days of knowing I was going to do a podcast, and then now it's dead. I don't have that life anymore. So there are small deaths in everything. And helping to put into perspective, there's always going to be an end in some way or shape. At least for what you are now. You're constantly dying. You're constantly changing and becoming new in different ways. And what is death of this physical body, but just another change of that.
Right. That's so interesting, because you did not watch my mom's podcast, but that's like essentially what she said.
Really?
About how she wakes up every morning as like a birth of a new day and like a new experience in life, and that when she goes to sleep, it's almost like it would be great to have another one, but like that this is a death in its own way, which is so crazy, because I've never heard anyone else say that like look at life as these small births and deaths as they go, and if you view it that way and you're okay with those, the ultimate death is just, like you said, another one of those. And
it's, I think, a great way to live your life. If you go the people who say live today as it's your last, like that's that statement.
Yeah.
If you go to bed, if you view the end of your day as, okay, this is the death of the day, how am I going to end it? How am I going to live my life today? Now I don't go thinking that every day.
Yeah.
But yeah, just don't make death out into something that's this ambiguous, hard to reach, non-personal thing.
I love that.
Make death personal.
Yeah. That's a great way to end this podcast.
Cool.
Thank you, Chris.
Welcome.
That was great. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks.
Goodbye.